computer. And is it recording? Do people see a sign that the thing is recording?
Yes, it's recording.
Yeah.
You know, it used to say, you know, Zoom is now recording with like this speak and spell computer voice.
I got
It
that.
isn't anymore. And I don't see the little symbol for record. Okay, great. Oh, there it is. Now I see it. All right. So the big deal for tonight is that we come out of tonight, everybody knowing exactly what you need to do for this week, for the course in general, and that you can navigate Blackboard it's pretty straightforward once you see how I lay it out. I know every professor lays it out a little bit differently. And then you just kind of get a clear understanding of the expectations of the course, as well as the types of assignments you're going to be expected to do. So you know what to expect for the duration. I haven't figured out everything I'm going to cover. We have, you know, basically 4 or 5 weeks. So it's going to go by really quickly. And so one of the biggest things, I suppose everybody at this point has taken online courses, but summer session is even worse, like staying on top of the work because it's technically a compressed semester. Obviously, I'm not going to give you as much work as if it were a regular semester and we're there for 15 weeks. It just can't happen. So it's a selective version of the course that I teach during the year. Okay, so at some point, I'd like us to introduce ourselves just a little bit. And I'll reference the, what do you call it? The Padlet introductions. Everyone here did their Padlet introduction? Is there anyone who didn't? Okay, silence. Okay, great. So, you know, I'll kind of go down the attendance list and I'll bring up your Padlet introduction and you can just talk about yourself a little bit and maybe I can come up with some questions for you. So one really important thing, this is an asynchronous course. I've said it in the email messages, but I just want to reiterate because students always ask me again and again. Nobody is obliged to be at a live Zoom meeting because it's an asynchronous course. However, I'm doing them and I'm going to do them periodically. Like for example, next week, I'm not able to meet with you during the week. So we're not going to meet. But the big thing I like about this is you can ask me questions in real time instead of silly back and forth on the email forever and ever trying to clarify something. And also, I just enjoy meeting with you guys. And also, if you have questions about material or content or anything else that you really need clarification for, you've got the time to do it here. So it's really, you know, these meetings are really here for your benefit. They're not meant as like extra work. Was everybody, because I know it was short notice, I understand that, was everybody able to get through the readings and complete the reading responses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody know? Okay, all right, good. Because I'd like to finish today with, there's one more person. I'd like to finish today with a little discussion of each of those readings, particularly because the 2 main assignments you have this week are what was due today and the vocabulary quiz that's due on Sunday. It's due on Sunday. It's a multiple choice quiz. I'll talk about it more, in which you apply vocabulary terms that are provided in the assignment folder. There's a PowerPoint and a video, and you're going to apply those basic kind of vocab terms of reading and literature to these texts. So instead of just giving the definitions of them, you have to apply them to these 2 stories. They're each a page each, so it's a quick read. One thing I want to say right now is that we're not going to have time to go over the vocabulary terms tonight because there's so much other nuts and bolts to cover. I almost never, ever, you know, quiz on materials that I don't cover, you know, in person. But this is one instance where the material's all there. There's a video. It's essentially like having a class lecture, blah, blah, blah. So you get the idea. Okay, So let me just start moving through some of this stuff. And at some point I'll take a little break and I'll talk to you guys and you'll introduce yourselves and I'll kind of just mark you down for being here. So we're going to go over the syllabus, the substance of the course, and the expectations. The format of the course basically involves navigating through Blackboard and seeing what's there and how I've laid it out and the types of assignments you're going to have. And then, we'll finish up with this week's assignment. Also in here, I have a little discussion about like, what is this course about? I mean, it's kind of an unusual course, frenemies. It has something to do basically with human relationships. And, this word frenemies is like this kind of catchy term that was kind of hip for a while. I mean, does anyone actually use this word frenemies? How many people have frenemies?
Everybody.
I would say past tense for me.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you think of the word. So let's just, because I want to talk, you have a class and it's biology or it's, whatever it is. And the professor just assumes like, what the hell they've spent their whole lives studying X, Y, or Z. And they come into you come into their class and they just assume what it is they've been studying. And you probably have an idea, but it's nice to get an explanation. So we'll start out with your opinion, because there's different ways you can think about a frenemy. I think there's a kind of standard Urban Dictionary definition that everybody kind of has at some point. What is a frenemy? And when I ask this, I'm not like asking you to get the textbook definition, because the one thing cool about the word is it's a kind of it's not exactly slang, but it's like a common word on the street in the town square type word. It's not like an academic word, right? So it's your idea is what I'm asking. I'm not asking for the official OED definition. Who wants to try that? What is a frenemy to you? Lauren, you want to try that?
Yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot.
You had a frenemy, which is an example of one, which means you have a working definition of one, whether you.
I think it's somebody who you have a tumultuous relationship with.
That's
but
good.
You also find yourself. It's almost like when you're forced to get along with somebody, even though you really, in an ideal world, you would not have anything to do with each other.
Okay.
Where you kind of simultaneously like respect them and get really aggravated by them.
Okay.
Kind of like a sibling, maybe almost like a sibling sometimes.
Yeah, sibling. Oh, that brings up a whole other ball of wax, because you can just be openly hostile to them. Whereas maybe with a frenemy, there's a kind of, because it's a back and forth, there's a kind of duplicity that goes on. Like you show them one image while you're secretly harboring like, I hate their guts or something like that. Cindy, what's your definition? Okay, so Lauren, that's great.
Yeah,
thank you.
So in listening to your videos and reading everything, I was able to, in my head, the way I can see it is somehow like relationships that you need, for instance, work relationships, colleagues, right? People who portray one thing, but how they are, or let's say an extended period of time, this is how I was able to like put it in my head. And you just have to kind of like accept, right? We have to be in this environment together. We have to be amicable, cordial. And although they may feel a certain way and they can be very phony on their ends, you just have to deal with. And although I may not have any initial, like I said, I've overcome a lot of things and just try to love everybody with the love of Jesus. I know there's nothing genuine, and so it's like a frenemies, right? They have their, however they may feel.
This was genuine. He was always willing to turn the other cheek.
So it's just
he had no hatred inside, apparently.
I'm learning. Listen, sometimes I sit here and go, I know you weren't laughing in Judas's face, but I'm learning and growing.
Very cool. So there's duplicity, there's like competitiveness that could be. Yeah, I think frenemies, probably you try to portray a positive image to them, or you talked about the issue of like, we have to coexist. We have to work together. We have to get along. So we follow a set of habits. We follow a set of manners, right? Customs, right? Etiquette, right? You know, etiquette's not just about sitting at the dinner table and you know, eating, holding your knife and fork properly. It's also about adhering to a set of codes of conduct so we can all coexist. So we're not at, you know, each other's throats, ready to, you know, off each other because of our tempestuous emotions. So it's interesting, you know, some of the things that are said here, typically when you say a frenemy, it's like that guy or that girl. So like in grad school, there was a guy who I was friends with, and he seemed very authentic and sincere at first. And he always knew how to kind of connect with people on a certain level. But then you realized it was always all about him, and that every connection he made was fitting a piece of the puzzle into his career. And it was never just like a kind of genuine human interaction. And then you realize you were just being treated as like, how can you benefit him in his career in some way? And it wasn't just me. There was like a whole group of people who, you know, superficially had relations with this guy, but underneath, like they couldn't stand him. Right. It was kind of interesting. Jeffrey, what do you think? What do you think a frenemy is, or what is a frenemy for you?
I was gonna like reference an example of like how
Sure.
U.S. relations is with other countries. Like for example, like Russia is considered an enemy, but like at the same time, we're like somewhat friends because we have to like use each other for different resources, or we have to like
Sure.
not blow each other off the face of the earth.
Yeah, Russia or any other country, like there's conflicts between countries, but then they're like, oh my God, we don't want to bring, you know, civilization to an end. So we're going to have to find a way to coexist. And
Yeah.
or we hate you, United States, we hate you. Your human rights are terrible. But actually, for our economy, we have to do business with you. So like China, we will superficially talk about their human rights abuses all the time, but then we have massive, you know, they've purchased like a US debt, and like they hold the whole country in hock, and which is a pretty powerful position. And yeah, and then there's like, you know, Trump loves Putin, but Biden doesn't love Putin, except for those business deals that his son did with the Russians and the Russian hookers that he probably paid for and stuff. Like, anyway, it gets complicated. Yeah, good. That's a good example. And out of necessity, countries have to get along to up to a point. Absolutely. Anything else you want to add?
So based off of that
What
example,
about on a more personal level, like in interpersonal relations, as opposed to countries or nations?
yeah, I was using that example because like in real world, that's what I think a frenemy is, really just people that use each other for their resources or their time.
So when you deal with other human beings, it's like Joe Biden dealing with Russia and Putin.
Yeah.
Okay, you said using other people, right? One of the big centerpieces in terms of the text we're going to cover for this course is Aristotle's Ethics. And the ethics deals with, you know, what is the appropriate, in the broadest terms, what is the appropriate conduct for a human being? Basically, basic question of moral philosophy coming out of the ancient philosophy, political moral thought was, how should a human being live? In light of what a human being is, they're social, they're verbal, they have certain impulses and desires for different things. They want food and money and sleep and sex and power. They want recognition, things like that. They want knowledge. How should a human being live? And in the ethics, he talks about just how central human relationships, particularly friendship, and a very specific definition that Aristotle is going to have of what friendship really consists of. And he breaks friendship down into three categories. And I'm not going to bore you right now talking about all of them, but one of the big ones and one of the most fundamental types of friendship he talks about is friendship based on utility. Friendship based on utility. Utility is just a word for like usefulness, right? In that you need people to get by. Human beings every day consists of having a shitload of needs that need to be satisfied. I need to put money on I need to make money. I need to put food on the table. I need to get here. I need to do that. I need to get a better job. I need to make things better with the boss, or, you know, whatever it is. And so what do? We connect ourselves. We're forced to connect ourselves with other people so that they can help us assist. They can assist us in satisfying the basic needs of our life. And I'm not talking about desires here, like I want a fancy $1 million car. It's like just to kind of survive. And one of the interesting things about us, survival for us doesn't mean like just living biologically. It means surviving in the human, the world of society, your neighborhood, your school, your workplace of work. That's survival. Like you might call it the rat race or something like that. So he while it's certainly not the most significant type of relationship you can have with another human being, Aristotle is really, despite how high-minded he is, and he wants something more than that, he recognizes how fundamental, like, let's put it this way, using other people is. And he doesn't mean that in the sense of taking advantage of someone behind their back, because when we think of using someone, we're kind of like, hey, you're my best buddy and I love you so much. And how can I take an advantage of you? That's kind of like using someone where they don't realize they're being taken advantage of, right? But if we can think of a whole set of relations, we probably wouldn't even call them friends, really. We might call them acquaintances or associates or partners, or there's a million different names. When he uses this word friendship, we're going to see he's going to mean a lot of different things at a certain level. But I mean, you go to my stupid fallback example. You go to Starbucks and I want coffee. I pay you for coffee, right? There's a relationship there. They want your business and your money, and you want the coffee. You trust that the two sides will engage in that exchange, and it happens. And you don't sit there and say, I love you for getting your coffee. You just say, hey, have a nice day. Bye-bye. And you walk out. You don't think much about them, right? But you're using them and they're using you, but it's not in a way that's exploitive. And it's certainly not in a way that everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows what the relationship is. There's no secret. Aristotle will talk about that other type of using people too, where people think they're getting one thing out of the relationship and they're actually getting another. Like, oh, honey, I love you. And the other person's like, oh, and I love you too, but actually I just want your money, right? Something like that. Those kinds of things. All right. William, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. You want to give us a definition of a frenemy? Your definition?
Yeah, the way I relate to frenemies is dealing with someone maybe at work where you just have to stand them and do what they want you to do just for you to be able to get by and do what you have to do. But indirectly, if you had your own way, you probably wouldn't deal with them. That's how I see it. Like they have their own set of ways in which, they want things done, and you also have your own set of ways, but you probably indirectly report to them. So you just have to get along with them indirectly.
Okay, good. You have to deal with them.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with them because the circumstances of your life put you in proximity to them. You have to deal with them because you need stuff from them, right? And they need stuff from you, and you're the person who has it. So you get some kind of mutual benefit, right? Yeah. All righty. I'm a little concerned now, though. Let's just say they're friends, they're enemies, and they're frenemies. The way you guys have defined frenemies, it seems like everyone in our lives could be a frenemy. What would it mean not to be a frenemy? Who do you know that you don't also have a certain frustration with? Or who do you know that you don't conceal some of your feelings of negativity toward them? It's not like your negative feelings of negativity define the relationship, but you still have them at some level. Is there anyone who doesn't have certain negative feelings about anyone in their life? Cindy, you don't have negative, there's someone in your life you have absolutely no negative
No,
feelings?
no, I wasn't gonna
whatsoever?
say that. I was gonna say there's some people you can be open and have uncomfortable conversations with and things of that nature. So I wouldn't consider that per se a frenemy. I think it's more the people who I'm labeled a lot as having a strong character, right? So I feel like it's people who I can't just be open with and say, hey, X, Y, and Z, right? No one needs a yes man. Someone needs someone. If you're my friend, you need to be able to correct me, right? We all have our different seasons and things
So
where we don't see.
the real friend is the one that actually puts up with you.
Yeah, talks to you, helps you grow, right? Like we're here to elevate each other, but also call each other out when necessary, respectfully.
Good. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing Aristotle is going to bring up. There's so many issues here. But number one, obviously, even the best relationships are not all positive because the two people involved are not perfect, right? And if they're not perfect, that imperfection is going to be reflected in the relationship. And people either work to make each other better or they don't, or a real friend is someone who's willing to know about all your imperfections. Not maybe not all, right? That's an overstatement, but about your imperfections, right? I mean, the person at work, that whole expression, too much information, right? They don't want to learn that about you, whatever it is, because they don't like you enough to know about it and to put up with it, right? I mean, this is an interesting thing that, and of course, from your end, you wouldn't want to tell them because you would say to yourself, like, they don't want to know about this and I don't want to tell them because it's just not the appropriate, there's not the connection there. But if you want to really know someone, it means putting up with, their imperfections. Because my impression is the more you get to know people, the more bad things you find out about them, right? It's like the first date is always perfect because they don't tell you shit, right? I mean, they put the Facebook, the dating website image up for the first, for the first date, because of course that's what they should do. If they don't do that, that's actually probably a really bad sign. I mean, maybe they're just being open and honest instead of being fake or something, but you could make an argument for why people do that, right? Put up the best face they can on the first date. Well, we know because first impressions matter. And if someone's not doing it, you're going to be scratching your head going, why aren't they showing me their best side? That's not a good sign. If it's this bad now, what happens when I move in with them? Like, holy smokes, things like that. Okay. So I have a kind of, I'll talk more about maybe my definition, but it's a kind of open term, frenemies. It's whatever. Obviously, it represents this conflictual, that there is both harmony and disharmony within our relationships. And I'm kind of inclined to think that all our relationships in this broader sense are frenemy type relationships, because there's a part of our relationship with other people that's harmonious, and it's a part that's disharmonious, whether it's our best friend or the guy or girl on the street or the subway, right? And that conflict is just as much a central part of our relationships as harmony. Like when we talk about conflict with people, we say that person is acting in an asocial way, Well, there's a very strict meaning of what social means, coming from Latin and Roman society and all this stuff. But to me, conflictual relationships are very social because they involve people being in conflict, right? As opposed to being, living on an island by themselves with, a wild animal or something like that. And conflict is just as much a part of our relationships as harmony. And my impression is, or my kind of position is, we kind of need both, and society tends to reflect that. All righty. So let me get to some nuts. That was good. Let me get to some nuts and bolts here and keep things moving. I want to share, if I can do this, Word. No, it's definitely not that. Oh my God, I've got so much on my computer here. Here we go. And I'm going to put that screen over here. All right. So let me just kind of move through this as quickly as I can. I'm just going to hit the important points. And if you have questions, please ask. So, this part gives you a little kind of, conceptual introduction. This is a writing intensive class. That's important to know because, for your distribution requirements, you need a certain amount of writing intensive courses. So some important things about class format, like what is going to be expected. Typically, there are readings and there are reading responses. That's kind of the week-to-week work. And beyond that, there are some quizzes like the vocabulary quiz and some kind of midterm and final I'm going to put together. I haven't finalized that, but there will be some essay questions where you have an extended period of time to write them up as a kind of formal writing in response to our readings. And the essay questions will be not identical, but similar to the reading response questions, right? So when you see the questions on the midterm and the final, they will not be foreign to you. They will be pretty familiar. So the stuff I've got on Blackboard, and I should turn to that shortly. Videos, PowerPoint, study guides. I've got all the texts there electronically. So there's no texts you have to buy for the course, just to keep it simple. Other major things, getting work done on time is pretty crucial. Here's the grade breakdown. Here are some important dates, and I might tweak these a little bit, but first quiz is due on Sunday. That's not going to change. And final grades, I have to turn in grades by August the 23rd. So any outstanding material, work that's due that hasn't been turned in, you got to get it to me before then so I can get grades in. I only give incompletes in like the most exceptional circumstances. Let me just touch on a couple other things. So, if you stay in the course, first of all, you guys are here. So if you're here being proactive and trying to stay on top of things, you probably aren't the students I have to worry about. But if you stay in the course, it's kind of like agreeing to the terms of the course and what's expected of you, and it's expected you complete it. If you've got a problem, you withdraw from a course within an appropriate period of time so it doesn't really mess up your GPA with unofficial withdrawal and all that stuff. If you happen to have real personal issues, I don't know, I had a student last semester, his apartment building, or not the whole building, but his apartment burned down. I mean, and he showed me pictures and everything. It's like, bona fide. So I know that in people's lives, shit happens. You've got work, you've got families, you may have kids, and on and on and on, right? People get sick. So the big thing is, if you have some kind of real life problem, just get in touch with me as soon as you can to say, yo, professor, I've got real issues. And it means that this week I ain't getting to your work right now. So when you get in touch with me as soon as you can, it says to me you're taking initiative, meaning like you're concerned about staying on top of things. And then I can negotiate with you about when you can get things done, right? So pretty simple. So I'm accommodating, but I expect people to keep me informed. And when people don't keep me informed, it makes me scratch my head about what the heck they're really doing. And also, I need some kind of, some type of evidence about your situation, and so on and so forth. One last thing, academic honesty. So last semester, for the first time, I had some really blatant instances of plagiarism, like cut and pasting from the internet, basically. So obviously that's like totally forbidden when you're talking about writing an essay in response to essay questions that's supposed to be your own work. So that's something really important to keep in mind. It's certainly not an unusual policy of mine. I'm just reiterating it because in recent semesters, I think because I've been teaching online a lot, there's a little bit of a tendency for students to do that. So that's like completely verboten. And I'll tell you one other thing that I dealt with just a tiny bit last semester that I had heard about from other professors for years, but I hadn't seen people do, which is on the discussion boards. I've set it up so you can't see other people's responses until you write your response. So what students have done, not saying anyone's going to do it, but what they do is they put a blank response in there, and then they get access to everybody's reading responses. And then they've kind of cut and pasted their own together, right? And that really bothers me because they're honest people who worked hard to answer the questions, and then someone else is taking their work, which is not permitted. It's dishonest. So you can't put in blank discussion board responses. And if you do that, you're just going to get a 0 for, hopefully I'm not speaking to anyone, but you just get a 0, and so that's how I'm dealing with that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory for the syllabus. Let me go back a second to the PowerPoint. I've got so much stuff open on my computer right now. Okay, what else do I have here? I think everybody's emailed me at my Gmail account, so that's great. I don't expect to have to talk to anybody on the phone, but I've got my phone number on the syllabus just in case. This is one of my memes that I like. What if I told you the information you seek is on the syllabus, right? So the syllabus is there for a reason. It's way longer than it should be. It's 4 pages. But the reason, and because I think that's ridiculous that it's 4 pages, but I've also found that by having all that information there, it's there for you. And nobody can say that I didn't provide it. And so look through it carefully is what I'm saying. You do it now at the beginning of the semester, you may never have to come back to it. But what else do I have here? So what are the assignments? Let me just go, I touched on this. We've got readings, we've got discussion board responses to the readings, and then we've got quizzes and tests. Okay, pretty straightforward. Those are all the types of assignments you're ever going to have. And after the first quiz, which is this multiple choice, you're going to have the midterm and the finals, such as they are, will be the exact same format, right? So they're going to have different questions about different texts, but the format and the types of things I'm going to be asking you, it's going to be identical. So once you take the midterm, you'll be familiar with what the final is going to look like. So let me go to, I think it's this one. Okay, good. All right. So can everybody see the Blackboard page here? We're good. All right. So I tried to set, Blackboard, when Lehman has this generic format that like puts a million things in the left-hand menu, and I just delete the heck out of them to simplify it. So here's our Zoom link. It's the same for every time we meet. So you're not going to get a new Zoom link, right? Course announcements. I think now that I've got everybody's email, I'm just going to be using the email account you gave me and send out group messages that way. So I'm not going to be communicating through course announcements going forward. So then syllabus and reading response instructions. Syllabus, we just looked at it. And I'm not going to go over the reading response instructions now, but it tells you the expectations for the reading responses. It also gives you like a basic grading rubric, right? So the reading responses, I don't grade particularly hard, right? What I'm looking for in the reading responses is clear evidence that you've read the text carefully and considered the questions carefully. The answers don't have to be perfectly right. It's just that I need to see evidence that you've read the text. So what's the function of them? The reading response questions prove that you've read the text, number one. Number two, they ask questions related to key aspects of the text that we're focusing on in the course. And then number three, they're questions that prepare you for the midterm and the final. Okay, so let's keep going here. So beyond that, all the day-to-day materials for the course are in assignments. So if we click here, basically, so I've got some things that you don't have visible yet, but everything is right here and there's a weekly folder, right? Simple as that. And I think everybody's already found this stuff. You can navigate to the discussion board through this, but what I've done, and I think what's better to do is just to navigate through these links, because I'm going to have reading response questions that are like for way in the future, or they may be things I don't use, because, and it has to do with the way you copy the reading response, I mean, the discussion board materials from one section to another. It's a pain. Okay. So up here is the module that explains what you have to do for the week. Pretty straightforward. So if we meet, I provide a little, blurb dealing with the meeting and what we're going to cover. Conceptual things we're going to tackle that week, learning objectives. The real important stuff is what we're going to do in class that week if we meet. And then down here, the materials and the assignment itself. So this is where like the meat and potatoes of it is. Next week, for example, in description, I'll give a little commentary on the text you're reading, and I'll focus in on like some key themes that I want you to focus on. Then the important thing is down here, you've got your assignment with the due dates, right? That's important. Let me pause for a second. Questions? Good, no questions. It's better when there are no questions. I hope it means everybody understands what I'm saying. Okay, maybe I'm over explaining it, but this is the first class. So
Can I actually ask one question?
yes.
The lectures that you posted on YouTube, do we have to watch those?
Okay, so there should be one lecture for each assignment. And yes, I'd like you to watch them. And I think it helps to, well, read the text, watch the video, and then answer the questions. I think that's the best order to do it. Okay, so let me point out some important things. So weekly readings are right here in the folder. I guess everyone knows that already. Nuts and bolts, what the course is about. And then in terms of really key videos here, you've got a PowerPoint for quiz 1, which has the vocabulary terms, and then an explanation of them, right? So here, I give some context and some issues about the terms, so that's helpful. Questions? Is there anything about the layout here that you have a question about, or anything?
A quick question. This layout on Blackboard, is that just on your end or is also on our end? Because I couldn't find the videos the way you have it formatted this way.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is if you scroll down, I mean, these are links to videos. These are YouTube videos, right? I mean, you have access to the class, right? On Blackboard.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the roster, so
Yeah,
there
yeah.
shouldn't be any problems with access. I mean, let me just, if I enter the student preview mode, So you're seeing it from the not professor view. That's totally weird. Did everyone else see the content there or no?
Yes, it's there under assignments. You just have to scroll past everything you wrote and it's on the bottom.
Oh, here we're looking at announcements. Thank goodness it's not messed up. Okay, I mean, it's here in the student view. So if you're having some kind of technical problem with Blackboard, you've got to talk with the IT people who deal with that. Okay, so it's 8:19 and we want to keep moving on here. Let me just go back to PowerPoint for just a moment. Okay, so let me just, we'll talk for just a couple minutes about the theme of the course again. And maybe, just the significance of friendships / human relationships for our own lives, and some things that have been said that really help to put it in perspective. I mean, in a sense, this course is really about human relationships, number one, and human nature, right? The human being what it is, body and soul. We have a psychological component and we have a physical component. We are naturally what Aristotle called a political animal. And also, he said the zoon logikon. Now, the Greek word logos means speech and reason. So you could translate that as the rational animal. Like, not that we're rational all the time like Spock in Star Trek, but that we have the capacity for reason, right? There's a great line from Alexander Hamilton, one of the founders, the author of the Federalist Papers. He said that the human being is more a reasoning than a reasonable animal, right? We have the ability to think and reason and use logic, but that doesn't necessarily mean we use it all the time or use it well, right? So the other way to think of zoon logikon, this word logos, is we're the speaking animal, right? We're the animal that speaks. And because we speak, we communicate through speech and we think with our words, right? And we're the social animal for we're a social animal, not the social animal, because, all mammals are social to varying degrees, right? I mean, we're going to start next week kind of looking at an evolutionary view of friendship and the role that starts out as a biological thing and a genetic thing, and that becomes an issue of culture, right? So we're social, I think, for two primary reasons. One, and this is Aristotle, we have needs. One of the weirdest things about you, well, maybe it's not so weird because all other animals are the same way. Human nature, it's a catch-all term for like what we are. We have needs that can't be satisfied under our own powers, faculties, and abilities, which is to say we need help to satisfy our needs, which means we need other people. And since we need other people, we have to use them, or we have to enter into relationships or friendships or partnerships of what Aristotle called utility, right? Their usefulness, we would say practical, right? We're not romantically in love with that person. They're not our BFF. It's not Romeo and Juliet. It's, I don't know, the odd couple who's living together, they don't like each other and they're roommates, but they're both paying the rent together, so it's cheaper that way, or something like that. So, the other reason we're the social animal is because we live not just in a world of nature, like the physical world and trees and rivers and all this stuff, but we live in a world of culture. We live in a world that is a world of artifice created by human beings beyond what nature provides. And one of the central elements of culture is our ability to speak and to kind of inhabit a world that's the product of human thinking and human concepts, right? So our concerns are not like the concern of a squirrel where it's like food, physical concerns, food, sleep, reproduction, all those things. We have all these concerns and problems that are a product of culture, right? Like, what's my status in society? Am I going to get a degree, that will put me at this level in kind of the rat race of work or something like that? All kinds of concerns that are well beyond just like mere physical survival and self-preservation, which when you think of the squirrel, you think, he doesn't go to the movies. His life is just dedicated to like, filling up his stomach and going to sleep and doing it again the next day. And Aristotle points out that we have two elements, like we've got to provide all those things for our body, but then we have a soul or a mind or psychology that has to satisfy a whole different set of needs beyond just mere survival, right? Is anyone familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy? Anyone heard of that? You take like a philosophy of education course. Basically, it's like Aristotle. At the bottom of the pyramid, he's got like a pyramid to describe all of human needs. And at the bottom is like food, sleep, reproduction. And then the higher needs are like intellectual needs or more psychological needs, emotional needs, things of that sort. Aristotle's Ethics is the book presenting the significance of friendship to human beings. And what does he say in it? He says, without friends, no one would choose to live. You wouldn't even want to live, even if they possessed everything else. Everything else. Wealth, power, esteem, all that bullshit, right? If you don't have a real friend, what is he saying? Your life is not worth living. Your life is not worth living. That's a pretty powerful statement, right? And, for even people who are antisocial, right? I'm sorry, but they don't live on an island with nobody else. They live around human beings because they wouldn't be able to function without other human beings. Okay, just a couple other things. Now we kind of talked about these things. I don't want to. Okay, a couple other things Aristotle says that are really interesting. Friendship is not just necessary, but it's also noble. Now, who the heck uses the word noble these days? It's like noble. But we get what he's saying. We kind of come up with other words. So friendship is necessary. He's saying it's not just necessary. Why is friendship necessary? Because we need other people. Needs are necessities, right? We can't get by without them, and we need help from other people to satisfy our needs. But he says it's also noble. And let's just say he envisions higher forms of friendship that go beyond just satisfying basic needs. Like, I need money, so I go and get a job and I work for a boss. And I have a relationship of utility, usefulness with that boss. And it's not particularly noble, but there are other people who I choose to be connected to, right? I have a quote on the syllabus, the Edna, what's her name? Edna Buckner, something like that, Buchanan. She says, friends are the family we choose. Friends are the family we choose. What the hell's the problem with your family? I'll tell you, you didn't have any choice over it. You just got thrown in with this bunch of people, and maybe they're great, maybe they're not, maybe they're somewhere in between. But you can't choose your family, right? And this is one of the funny things about it, right? Friends, by definition, are people you choose to associate with based on your preferences, based on what you want, based on what you like, not simply the hand that you're dealt, right? And of course, when she says family, it connotes like an intense solidarity, intimacy, comradeship, right? But they're the ones you get to choose because, your family's out of your control. Okay, another interesting thing. And it explains what people are really like when he says this. He says, friendship seems to hold cities together. We might use the word society here. Friendship holds society together, and lawgivers, legislators, representatives are more serious about friendship than about justice. He says when people are friends, we might just say when people get along, they have no need of justice. What do you think he's talking about here? What do you think he's trying to say? When people are friends or when people get along, we have no need of justice. I mean, what does justice have to do with? It has to do with like laws, legislators, has to do with like a court system and the police and all the stuff they do, right? What do we think he means here? You want to go for it, Lauren?
Yes, I'm thinking, what I think that he's kind of saying that if you aren't having conflict, if you're able to get along with people in a society, then you don't need the justice system because
Okay.
does that make any
You
sense?
said the $1 million phrase there. With justice comes a justice system. A system is like a whole bunch of people, part of institutions that do a particular thing. When does the justice system intervene in people's relationships?
Usually once a crime has occurred or an injustice has been.
Yes, absolutely. And we could say more generally, when the people don't what?
Get along.
Do the right thing,
Yeah.
get along.
I mean, think about it. When someone commits a crime, they've created a problem that can only be solved by, look, you've got one person and another person. This person A commits crime against person B. The problem doesn't get solved by person A or B anymore. They don't work it out. There's a third party system, call it like third party justice, instead of like the mafia where it's just vendetta and I'm going to kill your child and whatever, or something like that. You killed my child. They say, no, I'm calling the police up and you're going to jail. And then you go before the judge and the judge makes a decision, all jury, what have you, depending on what it is. So, I mean, he's saying something that actually we can really understand. In the most general sense, when people can't get along, justice has to come in to force them to get along. And that could mean like the one person gets thrown in jail and that's how they get along in the extreme case, right? Well, so that means people can't regulate their own relationships. If the police are showing up at your door, it's because the people can't regulate their own relationships themselves. When neighbors can't get along and it escalates to a certain point, they end up in court because, I don't know, you did something on my property. It's because they couldn't work it out on their own, right? Or they weren't satisfied with the way, which is the same thing with the way it was being worked out. Why don't people get along? We need other people. We're dependent on other people. Why are we unable, up to a point, to function with other people? What are some of the causes of conflict? What are some of the basic causes of conflict with other people?
Everyone is on a different page. Everybody wants to do what they think is right for them. And then it boils down to, I don't like the way you're doing it, and this is not how to do it. And then
Okay, so number one, you introduced like we all have different perspectives, which means we all have different understandings of our own good, our own interests, and they will come in conflict with other people's understanding of their own interests, right? Like think about the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and we all have the right to the pursuit of happiness, right? Well, what the hell is happiness? Let me tell you, Jefferson doesn't bother defining it. Because in a free country, to a great extent, it's up to you to figure out what it is, right? Aristotle is going to have a different answer than Jefferson, interestingly enough. He has an idea of what happiness is in the specifics. You might not agree with it either, but it's interesting. So people pursue what their happiness, I mean, Aristotle says, why do you do something? Because you thought it was advantageous to do it. Let me be crude here. You know, why does someone take drugs? Because they thought it was going to make them feel good, right? So in the process, they break the rules of society, and there can be consequences for that, or there are consequences for that. So we all have a different understanding of our own good or our own happiness, and that leads us into conflict. That's a really good explanation. Of course, the idea of Jefferson is that there were boundaries to what your happiness could be, right? Like for Jefferson, you have the right to life and liberty. If you think your happiness is killing someone else, well, that's not going to be permitted by Jefferson because it's a violation of another person's right to life and liberty. If you don't have your life, you can't be particularly free, last time I checked, right? So Jefferson is going to say your happiness, I'm not sitting here divining it for you, but your happiness can't be everything. Your happiness can't be to steal, it can't be to rape, it can't be to pillage, because you're stepping on other people's rights in the process. It has to be something that conforms with the rights of others to do the same things that you want to do. What are some other sources of conflict between human beings that necessitate the justice system stepping in? Any other thoughts? I mean, I don't want to use what brings us, what a simpler question, what puts us in conflict with each other? What are some other things that cause conflict in relationships with human beings? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all human beings are created equal. Do we all believe that we're equal? I guess it means it's a question about what you think the equality means. What kind of equality? Do we all think we're like equally as good as one another? We all have the same exact abilities in the same amount? Does anybody want to be better than anybody else? Does anyone want to be recognized as better than anybody else? Does anyone want to be recognized as worse than someone else?
Naturally, everybody wants to look good and everybody wants to be, you know, in terms of they want to be superior. That's a natural way.
So we can say a couple things. We have different conceptions of what our good is. And let's just, for argument's sake, one other big topic here. It can be summed up in the concept of recognition. Human beings want to be recognized for what? They want to be recognized for their worth. We have a word for this, but it's a crappy expression. Self-esteem. In elementary school, everybody has self-esteem, and the teacher goes around and saying, you know, Johnny, you're just as good as everybody else, and you're just as good as it, and we're not going to make anybody be out to be better than anybody else. And then you get to the real world and you go, holy shit, like everybody wants to act like they're better than everybody else. And it's a competition. And if this person won the Super Bowl, well, then there's a team that didn't win the Super Bowl. What is there, 32 teams in the NFL? I mean, do you want to, I like football. It's my example. Maybe you guys like European soccer or something like that. But I don't want to see an NFL in which all 32 teams get a Super Bowl trophy each year. I want to see the best freaking team. And I want there to be losers, right? And we live in a democratic society, right? Based on Jefferson's words, however imperfect the man was. We are highly concerned with the concept of equality. And if this person group is seen as superior, kind of like bringing them down, they have white privilege or something, they need to be brought down. And this is a disadvantaged group, we need to elevate them up, provide reparations or affirmative action to kind of equalize the playing field. So we are, politically and socially, that kind of mentality is really ingrained in us. And because we are Democrats with a little d, not like the political party, but like we all have a strong sense for equality. In America, we don't have nobility, bloodline nobility, where certain people get special privileges because they're elite. Of course, elite people exist and they get special privileges. We just don't call them kings and queens and stuff like that. Okay, but the reality is, despite all our concern with equality, is I suppose most people want to be seen as, better than at least somebody, if not everybody, right? And we want to be recognized for our worth. And to be recognized for our worth is to be recognized as better than somebody else. So when we want to be recognized, we're demanding something of other people, that they respect us for our status or our worth, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm the best at my job. I'm the best at school. I'm the best at this sport, or I'm better than these people, whatever it happens to be. And of course, that demand for recognition puts us in competition and then maybe even conflict with other people, right? I mean, man, look at New York. You've got the financial center of the world there with all the Wall Street and stuff like that. I mean, those people think they're like on top of the planet, right? Alrighty, so recognition, one of the great causes of conflict between people. Alrighty, so with the time left, what I'd like to do is to turn to the readings and read through them and talk about them and then a little bit, and then we'll call it a night. Acrobat Reader. Let me just see if I can find where I've got this. All right. All right. So this is a cool little story by Junot Diaz. A lot of students have read him before, and sometimes even this story. But I mean, it's a great story. It's called The Money, which seems to give a kind of singular focus to the money. And one of the questions is, what is this money really about? Money we think of, it's wealth, but it seems like the money in this story has some other meanings beyond just dollar bill amounts, ledger entries in your bank account. The other thing is, obviously, the narrator, who's this kid, he has this very interesting relationship with his friends on the street. And there's a problem with his relationship with them. And it's actually something we're all very familiar with. And it's one of the basic problems of relationships that we'll get to. So could I have a volunteer just read for us from the beginning, and we'll kind of work through it and talk about it and ask questions? Who would like to read for us? Cindy, do you want to read a little bit for us?
Sure. All the Dominicans I knew in those days sent money home. My mother didn't have a regular job besides caring for us 5 kids, so she scrimmed the loot together from whatever came her way. My father was always losing his forklift jobs, so it wasn't like she ever had a steady flow. But my grandparents were alone in Santo Domingo. Oh, my battery is running low. And these remittances, beyond material support, were a way, I suspect, for mommy to negotiate the absence. the distance caused by our diaspora. Sorry. She chipped dollars off the cash Papi gave her for daily expenses, forced our already broke family to live even broker. That was how she built the nut. $200, maybe $300 that she sent home every 6 months or so.
Okay, great. So has anything happened in the story yet?
No.
There's no action, right? So this first paragraph here is a kind of like a prologue that situates the reader as to what the circumstances of the story are. And it helps describe the setting, right? Which is one of your vocabulary terms. One thing this paragraph does is really get at the meaning of the money. It's not just, the title of the essay is not just money in general, the abstract concept of money, it's the money, the definitive article, the. What is the money? What money specifically are we talking about? And let me add, the money has a very specific social function that connects human beings into a special relationship. What is the money? Yes, Jeffrey.
I think it was him discovering like the relationships that he had with the kids weren't what he expected.
Wait a second. The money is a specific amount of money that the mother scrapes together. What is it?
$300.
It's not the amount of money. It's like what the money is for.
Their daily needs.
No. What is this money that his mother assembles seemingly like every month? Every 6 months, I should say. Every 6 months or so. What is this money?
To send home.
Okay, money that's sent home, and he talks about remittances. To remit. Anyone know what remit means? To submit is to hand it in. To remit is what?
Is to send it back to help other people.
Yeah, let's stop right there. To send it back. Remit it, send it back, right? The mom in New Jersey scrapes together this money because they're poor, and it's like she's digging the change out of the couch or something, and she's actually taking money that's supposed to go toward daily family expenses like groceries, and she's shaving some of that money off to remit it back home. What is the home that Junot Diaz is? Well, I should say the narrator, the boy. What is the home he's talking about? Because it's not New Jersey.
Santo Domingo.
Yeah, to the Dominican Republic. And who is the money sent to in Dominican?
The parents or the grandparents.
Yeah, so it's his grandparents and his parents' parents, right? Okay, why do the parents send this money back? Or why does the mother send it back to her parents? What's the function of it?
For their daily upkeep or to help them,
Yeah, in many societies, the parents raise the kids, and when the kids are old enough to support themselves and make money, the parents start supporting, the kids start supporting the parents once everybody's older and they need help, right? A lot of societies do that. A lot of different cultures do that. Okay, so they're in New Jersey, the money is sent back. Is the money just about paying the bills? The meaning of the money?
you mean the money that is sent back?
Yeah,
Or
is the meaning of the money just about paying the bills of the grandparents?
it takes care of them besides paying bills. I mean, they use it to, take care of themselves, and they use it to do all other stuff that, they need money for.
Okay,
Also.
you say that, and that's a reasonable inference, but they don't talk about what the money is spent on in the text, right? I mean, we can imagine everything you're saying being accurate. Jeffrey, what's the meaning of the money? Beyond just
They're
paying the bills, beyond just paying the bills, what is the meaning of the money? Remember,
they're
the whole title of this piece is not, I mean, it's funny. This story could be called His Friends or something, right? The title could focus our attention on his relationship with his buddies in the hood, right? But the author doesn't do that. Focuses on the money. Jeffrey, you want to try it? What is the meaning of this money? I don't want
so
to get
basically they live in New Jersey now, and they're sending back to their hometown, their parents. So like it's basically just trying to tell them that they remember them and that they still know that they have needs and they want to help them out because
okay.
they want to know that they haven't forgotten about them.
Good. So like, look right here. Those remittances, the money sent back to Dominican, beyond material support, beyond paying the bills, right? Were a way, I suspect, for mommy, his mother, to negotiate the absence, the distance caused by our diaspora. So the distance is not just a physical one, the distance is also a psychological one, right? The money is almost like an umbilical cord connecting them with the country they grew up in. Let's be clear. The narrator, the little kid, he's basically kind of an American. Like the life he knows for the most, not completely, but you don't get the all information, but the life he's lived is American in this hood. It's still an immigrant community. So it's not like suburban Midwest America or something like that. It's something you guys probably can relate to. But his parents, they probably feel like they're more Dominican than they are American, right? So diaspora. Anyone know what the word diaspora means?
Yeah, it's a term that is used a lot with immigrant communities. It basically means like part of the community that is no longer at home.
Pretty much. Very good. So people who are diasporic or they're part of a diaspora are displaced from their homelands, right? They're like in exile for whatever reason, in a new world, right? But furthermore, literally, the term diaspora means like to be dispersed, right? It would be one thing if, everybody from one country just picked up and moved to another, because if they did that, they could all recreate the life they had together. But when you're dispersed, you're not only away from home, but you're not connected with all the rituals and the habits and the feel that you otherwise would be. You're isolated. You're no longer part of your community. So what's the money? It's a way of kind of maintaining this psychological connection to their community back home. So let's be clear, the money's really important for this family, because it ain't just about this. It's about this an emotional psychological connection to their community, right? Okay, the rest of the story is really a story about him being in you could say the New World community, New Jersey, and his relationship with his buddies in this world. And the two things we want to answer really simply are, what's his relationship with these guys, and why does he even consider himself to be friends with them? So let's just pick up here. So what happened? Could someone read from here? So what happened? Jeffrey, you want to read for us?
From where it says "and"?
Right here.
Oh. So what happened? Exactly what you think. The summer I was 12, my family went away on a vacation. One of my father's half-baked get to know our country better by sleeping in the van extravaganzas. And when we returned to Jersey, exhausted, battered, we found our front door unlocked. My parents' room, which was where the thieves had concentrated their search, looked as if it was tornado tossed. The thieves had kept it simple. They snatched in a portable radio, some of my Dungeons and Dragons hardcovers, and of course, mommy's remittance.
Yeah, keep going.
It's not as if the robbery came as a huge surprise. In our neighborhood, cars and apartments were always getting jacked, and the kid stupid enough to leave a bike unattended for more than a tenth of a second. I can't see the top.
Yeah, right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, it's all the way up here.
Was the kid who was never going to see that bike again. Everybody got hit, no matter who you were. Eventually, it would be your turn. And that summer, it was ours. Still, we took the burglary pretty hard. When you're a recent immigrant, it's easy to feel targeted. Like it wasn't just a couple of assholes that had it in for you, but the whole neighborhood, hell, maybe the whole country. No one took the robbery as hard as my mom, though. She
Okay.
cursed the name.
So we know why she took it so hard, right? Because of first of all, it was hard to put the money together, and then the meaning of the money, which we've talked about. You want to keep going?
Yeah. It says she cursed the neighborhood, she cursed the country, she cursed my father, and of course she cursed us kids, swore that we had run our gums to our idiot friends and they had done it. And
Okay.
this is where
So
Okay.
this is important. So, this relationship with the friends gets depicted now. And the first instance of the word friend, it's the idiot friends, which maybe is an oxymoron. Like it doesn't quite go together. Well, maybe it does go together. So it gives us a little insight into her opinion of his friends already. Maybe idiot friends are not friends at all. All right, let me ask this now before we read any more. Are these kids really his friends? Are they really his real friends? Let's read the next paragraph and then ask this question again. You want to keep going, Jeffrey?
And this is where the tale should end, right? Wasn't it if there was going to be any CSI style investigation or anything? Except that a couple of days later, I was moaning about the robbery to these guys I was hanging with at the time, and they were cursing sympathetically. And out of nowhere, it struck
Who are these guys that he's hanging with?
his friends that aren't supposedly
Yeah, so
really his
notice how they're
friends.
called, when you say, yo, I'm just hanging with these guys, it's very kind of distancing, right? It doesn't sound as intimate as friendship, right? You want to keep going?
When you get one of these moments of mental clarity, when the nictitating membrane obscuring the world suddenly lifts, that's what happened. I realized that these two dopes I called my friends had done it. They were shaking their heads, mouthing all the right words, but I could see the way they looked at each other, the Raskolnikov
Raskolnikov glances.
Yeah, I
And
knew.
I knew. Okay, what did he know? What did he know? He doesn't tell you here in this sentence. I know it's short notice.
That they were the ones that took the money.
They get out.
Yes, they were the ones that took the money. These friends, he also calls these guys, who he also calls two dopes, right? What happened here in this paragraph? He's talking to them. He said, I was moaning about the robbery and they were cursing sympathetically while I was talking to them. What does he mean by that? They were cursing sympathetically. Obviously, we get the cursing part, but what's the sympathetic part? He's telling them about the robbery and how awful it was. And of course, they're the ones who did it. What are they trying to do when they curse sympathetically to him?
Act like they didn't do it and they were upset with him.
Oh yeah, so what are they saying? Oh, I'll just say it. Oh shit, man, that's awful. Like that's terrible that happened to you. And of course they have to be overly emphatic because they're trying to cover up their feelings of like, we did it, right? So it's really cool described. And then he has this moment of mental clarity because he knows the way they're acting is like a bit off, right? And he says this nictitating membrane obscuring the world. Does anyone know what the heck a nictitating membrane is? Did anyone look that up? What is it?
Yeah, it's a membrane in the eye that reptiles have that like
Okay.
protects their eyes. So it's like a
Okay, great. Awesome. You looked it up.
I did.
Does the narrator have a nictitating membrane on his eyes? Like we're in that movie V, the visitors who are reptiles from another planet?
Nope, it's a metaphor.
Thank you. It's a metaphor for what? It's not about his eyeballs. It's about what?
The
I mean, he didn't see anything new with his eyeballs, but he saw something with his what?
mind's eye, like
Yeah, the mind's eye.
realized it.
He
Yes.
understood. He had a moment of enlightenment. He had a revelation. And he saw it, but he saw it with his mind. I mean, you know, we use, when you speak about what your mind does, you almost always have to speak metaphorically. It's actually a great book about it by a philosopher, explaining all the things when we talk about what our psychology does, we use physical metaphors to make sense of it. Okay, so he had this realization, and they had these Raskolnikov glances. Does anyone know who the heck Raskolnikov is? I point out a book you should read. So he's a character from Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, right? And Raskolnikov commits this horrific crime. He murders someone. And he goes through the entire book, Crime and Punishment, you get the idea, feeling guilty. And there's a police inspector who like knows that he's done it, but doesn't admit it to him because he's like getting evidence still. And he just very cat and mouse with him, and Raskolnikov finally gets caught at the end. Okay. Are these people his friends? This is a kind of a trick question. Are these people his friends?
They're frenemies.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, I think there's a place in the story where he says, these guys, well, he says it right here. This is really the issue. These two dopes I called my friends, right? Here's the problem. It's this word, friends. We call people friends. We use the word friend when maybe they are not real friends, right? I mean, this story illustrates something we've actually been talking about the whole time, which is that with human beings, we can be duplicitous. We can have an appearance that we show other people, and then there's another reality going on behind it all along. And there's a problem with the very concept of friends, which is that we call all kinds of people our friends, and very often they turn out not to be our real friends. In some cases, it's just because we want to have friends, so we call them our friends. In other cases, we don't know them well enough, so we call them friends, and then we have an incident like this happen, and we discover, in fact, they're not. One little question here, and we're done with this reading. Why is he friends with these people? Why is he friends with these kids?
He is new to the community and he wants to fit in.
And he wants what? What does he want that we all want?
Relationships.
Yeah, we want friends. So what do? We say, hey, you're my friend now because I'm a little kid and I want a friend because I don't have one. Aristotle says something really brilliant. He says, the desire for friendship arises quickly, but the reality of it doesn't. Something to that effect, which means we all want human connections, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're there to be had in a certain situation, right? Why is he friends with these people? Because of the people he's around who he comes in contact with, right? He can't be, I don't know, let's say he's in Newark, New Jersey. He can't be friends with the kids in Jersey City because he doesn't live there. He doesn't have access to them. Or like dating, it's the same thing. I mean, the internet makes it a little more like, I'd like to order this, please. But I mean, you can only have relationships with the people you're actually around. You can't have relationships with people you can't be around. It's just, I mean, it's actually a really profound problem of connecting with people, because what if, oh, what if I had gone to this school, or what if I had been in this neighborhood, or all kinds of things. You would have access, you'd be able to connect with other people. Okay. So in one sense, they are his friends because he hangs out with them and all those things, but obviously they don't treat him with the respect that you would expect from real friends. So maybe we could make a distinction between just friends and real friends. Okay. Anyone want to add anything to the story, or anything that you took note of? Let me ask this. What does he do at the end? What is his problem at the end of the story? What does he want to do with the money? Does anyone remember?
Keep it.
Yeah,
Get to keep it.
it's his mother. They get beaten between an inch of their life. It's hyperbole, but he knows how serious this money is and what a big deal is, but even he wants to keep it. You talk about what causes conflict. Well, I want to do this because I want to do it. So he knows it's wrong, but he thinks he's going to feel good by keeping the money. And of course, if he keeps the money, nobody's going to know he has it unless he messes up somehow, because, the friends took it originally. And, what are the friends going to do? Yeah, somebody stole the money we stole from somebody else. They can't say anything about the money being stolen for them, right? Because of course it implicates their guilt. Okay. So it's amazing that after all the significance, the emotional significance of this money is stated, he still has the desire to keep it for himself, right? Despite that he knows that's wrong. Okay, so we will touch on some key things on Mending Wall for about 10 minutes, and we'll call it a night, because we're kind of hitting the limit here, and you've all been very patient. Could I have a volunteer? What just happened here? There we go. Could I have a volunteer read for us here?
I'll do it.
Lauren, great.
Yeah.
You just read through the whole thing, and I'll scroll if you need to.
Okay, I'll do it. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across. We got to scroll there and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd asked to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. he will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors.
That's a great lesson. Very nice job. That's really, thank you. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. What's funny about having thought of it, having thought of this saying, good fences make good neighbors, is when you say someone has thought of it, it's like they came up with it themselves, kind of. But the funny thing is, he obviously didn't come up with this sentence himself, and it's not clear that he fully even understands the implications of this statement that has been handed down from his father to him. The good fences make good neighbors. Okay, so let me just make a couple remarks here. Mending wall. Just like the title in Money, the title refers to the thing that connects all the characters together. The money connected New Jersey to Dominican, but it also connected the friends and the narrator together because the money became the central element in their relationship as it unfolded. Mending wall. It connects the two characters in this story. This is a poem, but it's basically a short story in terms of it unfolds ultimately as a narrative between two characters. What is the basic story here? Who are the characters? What's the situation and what do they do? So the narrator is one of the characters. And who's the other character?
The
What-
neighbor.
His neighbor.
What's the relationship between them?
It's like a narrator and his neighbor.
Yeah. So the two guys are neighbors. They each have their own properties. They live in an area that seems kind of rural. It's kind of like farm country or something. I don't know. What century is this? Is it the 21st century? Is it the 20th? Is it the 19th? It's really unclear. Farming and what's described is 10,000 years old, right? The agricultural revolution happened in the Middle East, roughly 10,000 years ago, starting anyway. And so what's described here is, it's not quite universal, obvious. It's pretty universal to human experience because actually agriculture and farming is so central to human identity, believe it or not, at least our cultural identity. So they're neighbors. Neighbor is a really funny relationship. What does it mean to be someone's neighbor? On the most basic level, it means what? It's not fancy.
It's just a physical proximity.
Absolutely. You live next to them. And it's kind of like your family, you're stuck with them. It's just like that person could be your best friend. They could be your worst enemy. They could be somewhere in between, but neighbor doesn't signify the quality of the relationship. We all know what Jesus said about neighbors. What did Jesus say about neighbors?
We should love our neighbors as ourselves.
Yes, love thy neighbor as thyself. Jesus must have had some really good neighbors. Or we're just not as morally exceptional as Jesus and we can't live up to the standard, right? So what's the problem of loving thy neighbor as thyself? Well, we all love ourselves the most. That's going to be one kind of axiomatic thing we're going to kind of discuss, the issue of self-love, that we put ourselves as numero uno, right? For all kinds of reasons, practical reasons, and not all of them are selfish in the negative sense, right? There is a rationale for us prioritizing ourselves. Well, you're not going to pay my bills and I'm not going to pay your bills. So you take care of your own business. So you put yourself first because you got to do it yourself. Okay. So the interesting thing about a neighbor is like it's proximity, but it's not necessarily positive. It's not necessarily negative. And it's hard to love your neighbor, right? And this guy respects, is cordial to his neighbor, but he obviously doesn't have a great, neither of them have a great affinity for one another. And that's not surprising. Like when you have neighbors, like, you know, my parents live in a place where they've had neighbors for decades. And, you know, there's always that awkward thing that comes up. So they maintain like a kind of business relationship. They don't get like too intimate a lot of the times with the neighbors. What can you tell me about these two characters? Do they have the same point of view? Do they have a different point of view? They have a wall in between their properties, right? To physically separate their properties. What's the function of this wall made of stones? We'll go about 5 more minutes. What's the function of this wall? The title is this thing, Mending Wall, which is a weird title, let me tell you. Let me step back. What's the action of the story here? What do they actually do? What happens? It's not a whole lot. It's really simple, actually.
They keep repairing the wall even after
So,
nature
there's-
tries to
Yeah,
bring
there's
them
the
together.
cycles of nature, right? From winter to spring, and since it's warm, they come out in spring, and during winter, the wall has deteriorated for different reasons. Hunters have moved stones apparently, and the winter itself, the cold weather and the freezing of the ground, and the expansion of water and stuff, like when it becomes ice, it expands, and so like it decomposes, right? And the cycles of nature have made it decompose. So they come out every spring. They have to do maintenance every year. It's just like potholes on the roads. Every year they got to go and fill the potholes. And actually the potholes are created the same way. The water seeps in there, and when it freezes, it expands and it disrupts the tarmac and all. Who wants to talk about that? So they come out, this is interesting. They come out to fix the wall each spring. Or you could say they come out to mend the wall, right? And the wall brings them together. It forces them to interact with one another, despite the fact that they're different neighbors with different properties and different points of view, right? But notice the title. The title is not Mending the Wall, which would describe their actions in the story. Mending the wall. That's what they do. It's mending wall, where mending is a present participle verb, right? Like action. It's happening now, mending. But it's not mending the wall, it's mending wall. And the word mending is being used as an adjective to modify the word wall. And sorry to get in the weeds of grammar here, but it's not a blue wall. It's not being described as a stone wall or a high wall. It's being described as a mending wall, literally a wall that mends things. What's the problem with saying you have a wall that mends things? Lauren's wheels are turning here.
It's counterintuitive. That's not what a wall does.
Yeah,
A wall separates things.
it's even more than counterintuitive. It's what?
It's just wrong.
Starts with a C, not just counterintuitive, but
Contrary.
yeah, contradictory, right?
Okay.
You said it yourself. Walls divide things. Mending does what? It doesn't just fix, but it's a certain type of fixing things. What do you do when you mend? Literally, what do you do?
You're putting it back together.
Yeah, and I think the quintessential example of mending is like there's a tear in a fabric and you knit it back together, two sides apart that are brought together, right? So it's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction in terms. A wall that mends, it don't make no sense. So let's just say it is a mending wall. It's a wall that actually mends, rifts or ruptures or separations. And I'll say a couple more things, but we want to talk about these two characters' points of view. They both have perspectives or opinions about the wall and whether they like it or not. What's the first line? Something there is that does not like a wall, does not love a wall. What's the problem with that? That can be taken as a complete sentence right there. It's not the final part of it. It's a comma and it goes on, down to the first sentence goes all the way down to line 11. Excuse me, line 4, right? But something there is that doesn't love a wall is grammatically, it can be stand as a complete sentence. What's the problem with that sentence? Something there is that doesn't love a wall.
It doesn't specify anything or anyone.
It doesn't, yeah, more specifically, it doesn't specify the,
Culprit.
could be a culprit. It doesn't specify the what? It doesn't specify the something. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So what is something is a pronoun, right? Which refers to some noun or a proper noun, but he hasn't told you what it is, right? So you have to keep reading to find out what it is, because normally when we use pronouns and we have antecedents, Bob woke up this morning, period. He went to work. He refers to Bob. Here it's reversed. It's like he woke up this morning, Bob went to work, right? So he keeps you fishing. What is the something? Because it raises the question of what that thing is, because you read this enough, it will become clear, but it's not clear the first time for sure. What is the something that doesn't love a wall? We could just say the wall, because we're really talking about ultimately this wall between the two properties and the two neighbors. What is the something? What does he talk about here? Something that doesn't love a wall, that sends, that refers to the something. It's still another pronoun, sends a frozen groundswell under it and spills the boulders up. So this something is the thing that starts wrecking the wall.
The Mother Nature.
Thank you. It's nature. It's nature the first time around. And here he goes on to talk about how nature deteriorates the wall. So what is the wall? It's a man-made thing. And what does nature do to all man-made things over time, or human-made things? It destroys them, right? If they're not what? If they're not maintained by us on a regular basis. So then he starts talking about human intervention into the wall, the hunters and stuff like that. And then, he talks about fixing the wall with the neighbor, and it's a kind of an outdoor game. That's interesting. What do they do while they're out together? They're not just fixing the wall, they're actually talking. So there's a slice of a conversation here between the neighbors, but he's not really, it's not like Bob said this and then Joe said that. He just puts in quotation marks some passages, and you realize they're talking while they're fixing the wall. And what is it? It's the wall that brings them into contact with one another. It reinitiates their relationship. You might say it mends their relationship during the winter where they're not interacting, or that's the impression anyway. Okay, so then at line 35, after the narrator, who's one of the neighbors, raises all these, questions about the wall. He wants to know, why is the wall there? What is it walling in and walling out? And to whom I was like to give offense. I mean, so this time he says something there is that doesn't love a wall, but he's not talking about nature anymore. What might be the something now that might not like the wall or love the wall?
I think he's talking about himself at this point.
Yeah, so he's either talking about himself specifically, or he may be talking more generally about not just nature, but human nature. Do we like, and this raises the specter of this wall being symbolic or metaphoric, and that it represents a boundary between human beings that's not just physical. Do we like having boundaries between us and other people? This is a trick question. Do we like having psychological and emotional boundaries between us and other people?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, that's the answer I wanted. Why? Because there's something in human nature that doesn't love a wall, right? We want to feel connected with other people. We want to feel intimacy. We want to feel like we can be open. We don't want to have to create separation from other people. Yeah, I'm trying to use words that are synonyms that don't just say the same thing. We want that solidarity with other human beings. Okay. So the narrator may well be saying there's something in all human beings that doesn't like boundaries between us. Even that physical wall also represents a psychological barrier between the two spaces. We could talk about property separation and stuff like that. And he says like, well, my cows aren't going to go on your property and my stuff. So what's the problem? Okay. Do we need boundaries between people? What are some of the types of boundaries that divide people or restrict their actions toward one another? What kind of boundaries does all societies have? The details may vary from one to the other, but all societies have certain boundaries that people are forced to stay within.
Social hierarchies.
Okay, social hierarchies, good. What else? Let's come to this and we'll see it more clearly. Does the narrator he doesn't hate the wall. He's not saying tear down the wall. He's saying, I don't really like it. And you have to give me a good reason for why it's here. So he's kind of open-minded and he's skeptical. What's the other neighbor's opinion? What is his opinion about the wall? Does he like the wall?
Yeah, he likes the wall.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a deplorable Trump supporter. In 2016, like build the wall and now it's going to be 10 feet higher, right?
Let's build the wall.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, when I taught this then, it was like everybody knew. I mean, because all those rallies he did with the build the wall and stuff. Wow. Anyway, so he says the wall is great. And how do we know? He doesn't use the word wall here, he uses the word fence, right?
Good fences make good neighbors.
Make good neighbors. And he thinks this is a good fence. Now, we could be talking about literal fences between properties, but we could also be talking about other types of boundaries between people. So he thinks the wall is good because what good walls or good fences make good neighbors. What the heck does he mean by that?
Boundaries allow me to quote unquote love you while still loving me, putting you in your box of where you belong and accepting you for who you are respectfully, but still in a place where it doesn't affect me and we can coexist. Okay,
great. I think that's where he's coming from. Absolutely. Right? What do these boundaries, fences, walls do? They restrict what you can do to the other person, right? And when you're restricted from doing something to the other person, you're a good neighbor because you might want to do something bad and you're not able to do it. So this is interesting. What you see about good fences make good neighbors is it's implied as an assumption about human nature. People are not, he's not saying people are terrible or evil, but he's saying that people generally are not good, right? James Madison in the Federalist Papers said, men are not angels. That's why we need government. That could have been Aristotle. Men are not perfect. That's why we need justice, right? Think about it. If utopia is a place where the society is perfect and everybody's harmonious and everybody's good. And if everybody were capable of being good and not harming other people, you wouldn't need any rules. You wouldn't need any boundaries, because everybody would just live in harmony, because there would be no impulse in them that would result in harm of other people at all, just by definition, right? So if you think you need boundaries between people, you're actually saying you're saying something negative about human beings, right? And nobody wants to say this, right? That's why we don't love walls. That's why something there is that doesn't love a wall, because we don't want to say to other human beings that we like that you could be really mean to me if I let you off the hook, or if I let my guard down, right? So we could simplify for a second. The narrator is anti-wall and the neighbor is pro-wall. Oh, that's not quite that simple, because the narrator just wants a real explanation. He wants an understanding of why this wall is necessary, right? And the other neighbor, he just says good fences make good neighbors. He doesn't go behind his father's saying, right? So he doesn't know why you need to have the wall. He just follows what his daddy told him, right? When you think about fences, you could be talking about rules of society. You could be talking about laws. You could be talking about the 10 Commandments, right? When people have rules that are backed by force, like the police or jail, right? It allows us, as Cindy said, to coexist with one another, under the assumption that we have impulses that might harm other people. Where do people, just 2 more seconds here, where do people fall on this spectrum? Do people agree good fences make good neighbors? Or are you more on the side of tear down the wall, and when we remove all the problems of society, we're all going to live in perfect harmony in this kind of utopian world, and there'll be no more conflict?
People will be on the side of good fences, make good wall, keep the wall.
So everybody's on the side of good fences make good neighbors? Let me ask a simple question. You open up a history book if you want to get more information. Is anybody aware of any society on the planet since we became more than just apes that doesn't have laws, that doesn't have some form of a justice system, that doesn't have some form of enforcement and penalties for wrongdoing? Let me ask this. What the heck would people do, given your understanding of what people are like? What the heck would people do if they had no rules, no police force, no justice system, no law? What would they do?
It's going to be chaotic. Everybody will do what they want, and that won't look right.
William says they do whatever they damn well please. What do other people think? Aren't there people who will just be good just because it's the right thing to do? Or do you believe that people only do the right thing because there's consequences for doing the wrong thing?
I think people do whatever, however they were raised. Based off of that, they do either what they feel like is right or whatever they feel like doing.
Okay, but imagine a society in which we're raised, in which there are no rules that we're habituated to. If such a thing were even possible.
I would, just looking at the current state of the world, I would say it would be chaos.
Yeah, let's
because-
flip it around. There's no society that doesn't have laws or something like an injustice system of some kind. And even with all that apparatus, even with all the laws and all, people are still very unruly, right? And of course, there's a spectrum, right? There are people who are very peaceful and peace loving, and maybe even if they didn't have all that apparatus, they still basically be pretty good and would never. But we can imagine for a good chunk of, so when we're talking about human nature, we're talking about like a bell curve. Like it's not everybody's exactly the same, but we can imagine that if there were no boundaries, no rules of etiquette, that it would be like some kind of chaos, right? So how is it that you can have walls or fences, or boundaries, which by definition divide? How is it possible for them to mend and bring things or bring people together? Let's take a really simple example. The laws of society, they provide boundaries to our conduct, boundaries between us. But do the laws of society, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, don't they also bring us together harmoniously?
It does in a way.
Let's put it this way. The law against murder prohibits this neighbor from killing the other neighbor. He can't do whatever he wants. There are boundaries to his conduct. But by having that law in place, it allows them to come together and fix the wall without, notice this line about, them turning their backs. There's this kind of implication, like, what happens to people when they turn their back? They don't know what's going on. I don't know, they get bonked on the head or something. They can, with rules of society, they can come together knowing that they can trust that they're not going to do those things, or at least those things are much less likely, right? Okay. So what's the interesting thing about this poem? That it's captured, there are two opinions about the boundaries in our society with this wall as a metaphor, right? And each of those points of view on the wall has implications for how we view what we think people are really like. Are they more naturally peaceful, or are their desires much more unruly and naturally conflictual? That's an interesting problem, right? Because we think that boundaries are the things that divide us. The argument here is that these types of boundaries to our conduct are actually the things that make it possible for us to come together with one another without bonking each other on the head. Does that make sense? Okay. All righty. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments before we call it a night here? Okay,
I had one question.
you go for it.
It wasn't related to this in particular. It was just
Sure.
to gauge, when will you be posting like week 2? Like for now, will it be Sundays or will it be Mondays?
I will try to have it up like well in advance,
Okay,
like in the next day or two. And I'm trying to get to just the rest of the whole, everything laid out for the rest of the semester. Yeah,
thank you.
session. Yeah. All right. Well, it was a pleasure to meet all you guys. I don't know where I'm on. Yeah. So have a lovely night. I don't know what happened to my camera. There, that's better. So have a great night, and I'll see you guys. Well, we'll be in touch we'll have a meeting down the road. Yeah. Okay. So if you have any questions, get in touch. Quiz is due on Sunday. All right.
Thank you, Professor. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.
Good night, William.
Night.
Good night, Jeffrey.